Hi, I'm Douglas Vogt again from the Dial Foundation. This is part 4 in series 10, where you're going to learn what the Ark of the Covenant really was, how it worked. This is where it pays to, when I say you have to figure out the Torah and what happened on the science side of it, you have to have a science background in order to figuring out what really did happen. So, this is what we're going to cover in this one. What was the function of the tabernacle? That was the tilt-up building that the Ark was in. How did the Ark work? What were the two tablets, or tables? Actually, in the Torah, it actually listed as tables, not tablets. The Torah and the problem creating a surface story. Why the story is so disjointed, out of sequence in many places, you'll see examples of it. What did Aaron do and why did he do it? That's the important part is, why did his brother do something as stupid as making a golden calf after all this stuff was happening? And finally, this is the most important, why did all of this happen? It spans over about 250 years. Why did, it goes from Abraham to finally the Exodus. Why did God orchestrate this whole thing? What was the purpose of it? I think I only come up with one answer. And I don't get another answer on this thing either. Anyway, this is the book I'll be teaching from, Volume 3. And Volume 1 basically tells why Abraham bought the cave, and it also has explains how some of the technology uses in here. This book also, chapter 6 and 7. The next video will cover what's covered in chapter 10 of this, what happened after they left, which is really science fiction stuff, or it's really, philosophically you have to figure this thing out. It's the most deepest, darkest secret that's embedded in the Torah. You have to know Moses' code systems in order to unravel everything, the surface story. And then finally, this is the key one, to know you're dealing with extremely highly advanced technology, not something that's from the late Bronze Age period. Basically, like I've said in the previous videos, a late Bronze Age man, Abraham, came across, because he was curious, the technology of an extremely highly advanced previous civilization that he found deep, deep in a cavern. Anyway, that's it. And here's some of the previous videos you can watch, Series 8 and then Series 6 on the code systems. Series 2 would be the alphabet. Parts 1 through 3 gives you an idea if you haven't bought the book yet. There's more in the book, obviously. Okay. This is what I figured out what the length of the sacred cubit was. The only one who gives the clue is Baruch writing as Ezekiel. It's 24.136 inches. So the tent of meeting was 100 cubits or 201 feet by 50 cubits or 100 feet. I found the sacrificial altar here. The previous video, part 3, shows all of these. This is now how the whole thing worked. The bread stand, the platform where the ark was, and the candle stand. Now, these remain. These are all fixed points. And they're all, as you can see, based on, this is 50 cubits, then 25 cubits, then 12.5 cubits. This platform could have been shifted further that way, but these things remain the same. In other words, this thing could have been further back here. It really doesn't matter. This is just the way I drew it. The tabernacle, once you figure out what the length of the sacred cubit was 30 feet by 60 feet. And you'll learn later it was about 20 feet high, a little over 20 feet high. It's a pretty big tilt-up building. The tabernacle. Here's historical literature. Inside the King James Version of the Bible, they translate tent of meeting as tabernacle of the congregation. That's wrong. This is the word, this is the Hebrew word, and the word for tent is that, and tabernacle is this. You can see it's totally different. So, but the Hebrew books, the best one I use is Jewish Publication Society of 1916 or 1909. The current ones I don't like they changed a lot of the wording because they couldn't figure it out, basically. Anyway, I think that's what caused the confusion between the two. There's no confusion within the Hebrew books. It's just the King James Version, they're confused. This is, if you want to read the stuff online, this is the interliner, which I had to use many times to know what the words were, what it really literally means. And here, this is if you want the Jewish Publications version of 1916. It's there. You could read it from that. It's all online. Okay, I'm going to do the bread stand and the candle stand. They didn't really have any function for how the tabernacle and how the ark worked. So I'm going to cover them quickly. This is the reference for them. And thou shalt make dishes thereof, and pans thereof, and jars thereof, and the bowls thereof, and pour out and of this stand of pure gold. Set upon the tables bread before me continuously. Now, in there it does mention they put the showbread on top of the sacrificial altar along with oil and stuff like that. I don't know why. It wasn't really necessary to create smoke, but that's what they did. Chances are this is more than one layer. They've got pans and bowls and jars. There's probably 2 or 3 layers to this thing, or shelves. Okay, and thou shalt make them after their pattern, which is being shown thee in the mount. In other words, just like when Moses saw that hologram of a burning bush, somebody went deep into the cavern, and it played out for them, showed them what to build, and probably how to build it, all the elements that they wanted built. In other words, the Hebrews, they were just building this thing. They had no idea what they were building. You're going to find out and how it worked. Exodus 40:22, and he put the table in the tent of meeting, tent of the congregation, upon the side of the tabernacle northward. This was north of the tabernacle, the tilt-up building, from outside the curtain. Now, usually they're saying the word veil, but it's not right. The Hebrew word is really for curtain. And he set the bread in order upon it before the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And thou shalt set the table from outside of to curtain. That's the literal. Anything you see in the brown like this, I took the literal translation, so it's a little bit awkward, the English, but that's the literal translation. And the candlestick over against the table on the side of the tabernacle towards the south. And that's exactly where I found both things, the mounts for this as well as the candle stand, and it was south. So put the table on the north side. That's another artist rendition of what they think the table was, which I think is wrong. It should have been multiple shelves on the thing. Again, it shows dishes, pans, bowls. Here's the references for you. Candle stand. This had to have been an oil lamp because I don't think they even invented candles yet. I don't even know where they'd find tallow to make candles in the Sinai desert. And this, of course, was placed just south, equidistant from where the ark was. But both were outside the tabernacle. Now, the sacrificial altar, that was important for the process. Legs of the altar were supposedly 3 cubits, which had been 6 feet high, but that would have been too high for somebody to throw an animal and wood on top of it. So for what we found, this is what I think the actual shape of the sacrificial altar was. This is what it looks like today. It was obviously round. And the Bedouins took, like I explained in part 3 of the video, they took most of the stones and they buried their dead with it. Thank you very much. The legs are probably about 3 feet, and there was a brass netting or grating they had on top of this brass table. So, and its dimensions were 3 cubits by 5 cubits square, which is 10 feet square. That's pretty big, but it would have easily fit around a round altar. And that's why I knew this was going to be round. And it turned out to be round too. You'll also notice all the numbers are showing up. The 6,034, the 12,068, ignore the decimal point. Here's some people's rendition of what it is. It can't look like this. It just can't. It was probably just the legs and the brass grating. They show the brass grating pretty good here. They had no idea. It couldn't be this. You'd need a forklift to lift this stuff. Yeah, brass is pretty heavy. Brass is copper and zinc. Now, copper and zinc and even tin were mined in the Sinai Desert. But that means they had people foraging all over the Sinai for the ingredients to make this stuff. Anyway, that's how I think this whole thing was put together. There was horns on the four corners, but the grating was actually right on top of the stone altar. And you say, okay, well, usually when we're making a barbecue, we put the fire underneath, you know, and then you put the animal on top or the meat on top and you go barbecue it. We love barbecue. I love beef ribs myself. What happened here, they had another purpose. They had the wood on top of this thing, plus the chopped up animal, plus some of the animal fat, and they throw some bread on top too for good measure. They were making charcoal that would smoke. The key part of the whole thing is smoking it. They wanted the smoke. Also, if you're a physicist or metallurgist, the amount of wood they would need and materials to make this brass device, which is pretty big, and they also made brass loops and stuff like that. They had a real smelting operation going on. That's a lot of zinc and copper to go make this stuff and all the rings and stuff like that. They had, and also you had to make a crucible to heat this stuff in. I don't know what they used, if they just made a ceramic cauldron and did it that way. I don't know, but there was a lot of smelting going on in this location, and they had to go pretty far to go find all the wood. They may have found wood in both big wadis nearby and just collected it from the wadi and used that. But we don't know. They don't tell us. Now I'm going to focus on this thing, tabernacle itself and this. Again, you'll see all the dimensions are the 3017 number, 6034. The opening was on the east side, not the west side. This is where the fire was going on. They describe walls on these three sides, but nothing on this side. The walls of the tabernacle had three pop-up walls of cedar, not acacia wood. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. If this thing's 20 feet high, you can't find straight lumber out of acacia that long. You could maybe 5 feet for the Ark of the Covenant, but no way can you find straight wood that's 20 feet, and acacia is a hard wood. I don't think so. And also you realize the boards were 20 feet by 3 feet wide. No acacia tree has a trunk that has a 3-foot diameter, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches, but not that. There's no way. So it probably is cedar. Exodus, and thou shalt overlay the boards with gold and make their rings of gold for holding for the bars, and thou shalt overlay the bars with gold. They've got, and it doesn't sell only one side. They're coating boards, a whole bunch of boards. This thing is like 60 feet by 30 feet. 3 feet wide and 20 feet long with gold. I don't know if they just, a crucible again. They melted the gold and poured it on top of the boards, or they had to make thin sheets and then bang it on. They probably poured it on, like you pour on paint. It gives you an idea how much gold they got out of that Baal Zephon, that spent gold mine that Moses retrieved when his brother was with the congregation. That mine was loaded with gold because he couldn't go back to the family burial cave because they were watching him too much. But so he shoved it into that bells a phone. Gives you an idea how much gold they had. 5 horizontal bars which attached to the vertical board that held it together by gold rings on the boards. And Torah gives no description of any of the wall on the eastern side of the building. No, you're supposed to figure out the doors on the eastern side. By the way, nobody, all the renditions I saw of the tabernacle, nobody got it right. Leviticus 16:14. And he, Aaron, shall take of the blood of the bullock and sprinkle it with his finger upon the shelter eastward. That's where the door was. Nobody figured it out. This is an acacia tree in Egypt. There's no way you can get 20 feet straight board, and there's no way they're 3 feet in diameter. And anyway, it's impossible. Here's one I photographed in the Sinai. I think I have a picture of Vic in it. He came up to about here. So it's not a very big tree. There's no way. And this thing's only about 6 inches in diameter. This is what the Sinai looks like. We're talking desert here. A couple of straggly little bushes and stuff like that hanging on to life. This is a cedar from Israel. Now, there was a mountain range that was fairly nearby, and they have found junipers on top of that mountain. 3,300 years ago, I'm sure this place was a savanna. They got more rain. And they probably also had cedar on top of those mountains. Means and you can see it's easily 2 to 3 feet in diameter. And I think that they had a whole group of men that went to the top of the mountain, cut them down, trimmed the branches off, and hauled it back to the place. Also, cedar is kind of a lighter wood, and you could haul a board that's 3 feet wide and 20 feet long with a bunch of guys. They had to have made wagons to haul this stuff. There's no other way. Anyway, okay, they had 4 layers on top of this tabernacle. Now they're making something really important. This is more science than anything else. So those of you who are atheists, hang on to me with this stuff. Listen to this stuff. You're going to see in a few minutes what they were actually making. And the Hebrews had no idea what they were building. Like given orders, this is what you do and this is what you're going to do. The first layer was basically, its dimensions were 36 sacred cubits by 28. So the end result was, it was 2 pieces and they were clapped together, 72 feet by 56 feet. Now remember, this thing was 60 feet long. So it's pretty big. The second layer was goat hair compared to 11 strips, and 1 strip overlapped the other. This is part of the roofing mechanism. Layers 2, 3, and 4. Again, each strip was 4 sacred cubits, or 8 feet by 5 feet. 11 strips, 1 overlapped, and they were held together with the loops again. And what they did with it, this side went the 80-foot one, so there's 60 feet, and there was 10 feet overlapped on the east side and the west side. The east side is where the door was. So the top of the door on the east side was the roof system. So you only had to cover or have a curtain for the remaining 10 feet. Layers 3 and 4 were ram skin and they think badger skin. Sometimes it's translated as seal skin. There's no way they can get seals there in the Sinai desert. So it's something else. That's it. By the way, the first layer had the drawings or the pictures of cherubim, which are young baby boys with wings. If you're going to go inside the tabernacle, you would be inside the veil or curtain. In addition to this, there was a curtain supported by 4 gold-covered posts placed at the eastern opening as the door. If you were outside of the tabernacle, you were without the curtain. There's the references. Let's see what else. Oh, I almost forgot one thing I want to go into. The horizontal boards were also covered in gold. So yeah, So that's actually important electrically speaking. Think in terms of electricity. The boards that held these gold panels were also gold, and the rings were gold. Got that? There's a reason why, and you're going to find out in a few minutes. Here's some renditions of what they thought, what artists and scholars think this thing looked like. One, immediately they screwed up. This thing's supposed to extend 10 feet on that side and 10 feet on the other side. The door wasn't on the west side, it was on the east side, on the other side. Also, they made this thing too small. It's 201 feet by 100 feet. That's not 100 feet. Here again, same mistake. Oh, they also show it in a valley. It wasn't, it was on top of the hill. And I showed you the top of the hill in the previous video. Sacrificial altar there. Again, the door on the wrong side. Again, the thing's made too small, maybe only for the model they were doing. Again, curtain's supposed to come down to here. The door is on the other side. Same thing here, no difference. Here's somebody who, they put the candle stand on the north side and the bread stand on the south side. It was wrong. Bread was on that side, outside, and the other one was over here. They got that wrong, throwing the door on, obviously on the wrong place. Same thing here, no difference. Oh, this is the literal translation of the lampstand, which went on this side. The lampstand in tent of appointment. Appointment being this, that. Oh, I correct myself. This is the problem right here, the bet. Bet doesn't only mean in, it means sometimes at or near. So that's where they've been making the mistake, in the tent of, I'm sorry, I'm going to correct myself, appointment, really the tabernacle. So that's the mistake. The bet with the dot on it means something else, not just the word in. Procedure for the priest following the first were first to start a wood fire on top of the brazen altar. And after that, they put the, when it started burning, they cut up the animal, they put the animal on top of the brass, this brass netting or screening. And then they put incense on top and, well, I don't think too much on there. They put the fat on top of it, then they use a brass pan to take the charcoal off, and they put it inside the tabernacle on the incense altar, which was 2 feet by 2 feet and 4 feet high and made of gold, but I'm sure the legs were wood and overlaid with gold. And that's how it is. Now, as they wanted it to smoke, the charcoal inside the tabernacle to smoke. But as you saw in the description and the references, there was no chimney. So they wanted that smoke inside the tabernacle. Now, they wanted it, and it will say later, maybe this is the quote, "And thou shalt take all the fat that covereth the innards and the lobe above the liver, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is upon them, and make them smoke upon the altar." That's the one that's inside the tabernacle. They wanted basically a smoky fat fire. I called up the Bellevue Fire Department, and I asked them, okay, what's the difference between a fat fire and a regular fire? And they said the fat fire, the smoke lingers in the atmosphere, and it's smaller particles, lingers in the atmosphere longer. So I think that was the intent. They want the fat, and God says specifically, you're not eating the fat, we want the fat. He wants it. So they wanted a smoky environment inside the tabernacle. And they wanted it actually to the lid of the ark. And you'll see why. Leviticus, "And he, Aaron, shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from off the altar, the sacrificial altar, before the Lord, and his hands full of sweet incense, beaten small, and bring it from inside of curtain," they're inside the tabernacle, And he shall put the incense upon the fire before the Lord, before the Ark of the Covenant, that the cloud of the incense may cover the ark cover that is upon the testimony, that he die not. Now, they wanted, like I said earlier, they wanted the smoke down to the lid of the Ark of the Covenant itself. Now, because the Ark had the two cherubims, and they had something in between, which we're going to go into next. So why do they want a room full of smoke? Now, this is 30 feet by 60 feet and 12 feet down of smoke. Now, you wonder why it says in there why Moses had a veil over his face. Would you walk into a room like that full of smoke without putting something over your mouth? Of course not. And he didn't either. He wasn't an idiot. Now we get to the science. All you electrical engineers out there and scientists, you're going to enjoy this. Now you're going to know what it really was that God or the operating system had them build. This is called flame speakers or plasma speakers. It was discovered by Faraday in the late 1800s. And what he discovered is if you put a high voltage across ionized particles, that you will get sound. So these guys, they're called either flame speakers or plasma speakers. So you can look it up on the internet, on YouTube. These screenshots came from YouTube of people who make flame speakers. In fact, they sell them commercially for not much money. Now, the Hollywood Bowl in the early 1900s used flame speakers for their loudspeakers, but they used natural gas with the voltage running a spark across the natural gas and a big cone to make the loudspeaker. It basically ionizes in this case, just the atmosphere, the nitrogen and oxygen in the atmosphere, and you get sound out of it. Here's another example here. This is one from I have in the book. It's from a German company. You could tell with these big cans. These are capacitors in here, big high voltage. Depending on how wide the spark is how loud the sound is going to be, and also how much voltage you need to go between that spark gap. So here's another one. This is not a flame. This is actually a spark, and making a plasma basically, and high voltage issue again. And this is a sound comes out of it. And the examples on YouTube, you'll hear it. And you'll hear sound coming out of it. The wider the gap, the louder the sound. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold. Of beaten work thou shalt make them. Well, beaten means it probably, I don't think it was solid gold. It sounds like they made a wooden carving and then they poured gold or put a gold covering over it. Although it'd be awfully heavy. And the cherubim shall spread out their wings on high, screening the ark cover. This is the ark cover. With their wings, with their faces one to another. So they're facing themselves towards the ark cover. But they're looking down at something between them on the ark cover. Shall the faces of the cherubim be. So they're looking down, but they're facing each other, but looking down in between them. Number one, they got this wrong. They've got this as, I think, a woman. It's not a baby at all. They didn't understand that. Spark gaps, it would kind of work, but it wouldn't be all that loud. This wouldn't work at all because the gold is touching each other. The anode and the cathode would just short out. Thank you very much. Exodus 37:9. And the cherubim spread out their wings on high, screening the ark cover with their wings, and their faces one to another towards the ark cover, where the faces of the cherubim. Again, they're looking down at something. This is the one from Raiders of the Lost Ark. This wouldn't work. I think this is actually touching. It wouldn't work at all. This one, 19th century art, lovely, but it wouldn't work at all. This one, they got 2 old men looking down, but they're supposed to be facing each other. They really got that one wrong. In fact, none of the pictures I've seen got it right. None of them. Because they're missing one important thing in between here. They never got it. In the Legend of the Jews, On the ark were the cherubim with their faces of boys and their wings, and the face of each cherubim measured 1 span. 1 span turned out to be 6 inches. It was from between the 2 cherubim that God communicated with Moses. The heads of the cherubim were slightly tilted back. So I want you to understand the image you see here. 2 baby boys with their heads tilted back, so the closest thing to each other are their lips. You'll see the symbolism in a second. But they're looking down at something in between them. And nobody got it right. Nobody. Oh, sorry. This is the one from Raiders of the Lost Ark. This wouldn't work. They touch. This one, I think I couldn't make out what animal they had here at all, but it's a pretty picture anyway. Exodus 25:22, and there I will meet with thee, and I will speak with thee from above the ark cover. So this is the ark cover. Above here, in here, you're going to hear sound. From between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. In Numbers 7:89. And then Moses went into the tent of appointment. It was not called a tabernacle, it's a tent of appointment. That's the tabernacle. That he, God, might speak with him. Then he heard voice speaking unto him from above the ark cover that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the 2 cherubim, and he spoke unto him. Made it pretty plain. But nobody picked up that something's actually here. Nor what this thing is, I have no idea. There is one item that is missing from all the models I've seen. That's in the center of the ark. Okay, I'm going to give you the hints and clues, and the smart ones out there will figure it out right off the bat. 1 Samuel 2:8, he, God, inherit the throne of glory. Samuel, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who sitteth between the cherubim. 2 Kings, which sitteth between the cherubim. Isaiah 37:15. The exact same quote was in 2 Kings, and I'll explain why. The high priest who wrote this portion of 2 Kings was the one who wrote Isaiah. In my next book, Volume 4, you'll find out that the high priests were the prophets. They had 3 names, a given name, a priestly name when they became 20 and entered the priesthood, and then finally, if they were the eldest son, they became the high priest, they would adopt a prophet's name. I identified all of them. Jeremiah, do not disgrace the throne of thy glory. Goes on like that. Now, Ezekiel I put separate. Ezekiel is really the pen name, the prophet's name of Baruch, who was Jeremiah's grandson. He didn't trust his sons. If I can tell, he had either 3 or 4 sons. This is the grandson. Now, the reason why all of a sudden he's the only one who gives the actual length of the sacred cubit. A cubit and a handbreadth is, and all these descriptions, very good descriptions, is because he's the guy who put the ark away. He's the guy who took it out of Jerusalem, 7 days journey, and put it back in the family burial cave. It's all encoded in Ezekiel. So when it says there, God tells him to take your stuff out of Jerusalem and then go through Garden 8, his stuff is the Ark of the Covenant and some of the other stuff. By the way, I think the tabernacle was already put back in the family burial cave long before, when they no longer needed it after Solomon when they're building the temple. But that's just a feeling I have, a theory. Okay, back to Ezekiel, Baruch. Then I looked, and behold, upon the firmament that was over the head of the cherubim, there appeared above them, as it were, a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. Now, there's one more part in this besides that, besides what I'm going to show you in a second, what was placed in the center of the thing. There were also 4 discs, what I'll explain after I explain this throne thing. And that evidently threw an image up in the smoke above the ark. So that's what he's describing here. Some of it may be literary where he actually is looking at the thing, because remember, he took it down, and they took it, not just him, he had more people had to help him, and take it back to the family burial cave out of Jerusalem. Anyway, he wrote most of Psalms, but not all of them. Some of the Psalms was written in the 1st and 2nd century. Thou sittest in the throne, judging right, but the Lord is enthroned forever, his throne for judgment. Thy throne given by God forever and ever. A scepter, that's the rod, the scepter of thy kingdom. Psalms 47:8. God reigneth over the nations. God sitteth upon his holy throne. Thou that art enthroned between the cherubims, shine forth. The foundations of thy throne of mercy. And let's see, Psalms, and the Lord reigneth, the people tremble. Enthroned between the cherubims, let the earth quake. Got the idea that maybe there's something in between the 2 cherubim? That's my rendering what I think it is. 2 baby boys, their heads should really be tilted further back. The closest thing to each other was their lips. Something that looked like a chair, but it's not a chair. This is a computer, and it's also probably the power supply. There was also 4 discs, one on each side of this cherubim, and they threw an image up on top in the smoke above the ark. This thing produced the high voltage and modulated the lightning to give the sound. That's why when they arrived at Mount, well, not really arrived, when they turned this thing on, and the congregation was around the place, it was so damn loud. You got a speaker that's 30 feet by 60 feet and 12 feet deep of smoke that's all oscillating thanks to this thing. God knows how many volts it takes. I guess your electrical engineers out there, if this is 1.5 or 1 3/4 feet, you'd probably figure out how many volts it's necessary to gap this, and also how many amps. We know it was enough amps to kill Aaron's 2 older sons who were in their late 50s, early 60s. Remember, Aaron was 83 years old, so he had kids that were late 50s, early 60s. So that's how this thing really worked. Now, did the late Bronze Age people know that they're building this thing and why? No. This operating system had them build a flame speaker and all the components. But he did it in a big way. A speaker that's 30 feet by 60 feet, this thing was so loud, no wonder the people were scared stiff. I'm surprised you wouldn't go deaf from it. Here I'm going to go through the discs. It's only hinted at in Leviticus 16:2. And the Lord said unto Moses, Speak unto Aaron thy brother, and he come not at all times into the holy place within the curtain, within the tabernacle, before the ark cover lid, which is upon the ark. He die not, for I appear in the cloud above the ark cover. Now, is the only way you can appear above in the smoke above the ark is if something's projecting an image above it. Now we get to Baruch, aka Ezekiel. He mentions it multiple times. Now, he's the only one who mentions the 4 discs. Now, there's a practical reason why. The platform we found was about 2.5 feet from the ground, which I showed you in part 3. And then the stand that this thing went on was about, was it 2 feet or 3 feet? And then the box itself was 3 feet. So the lid is about 8 feet up. So if you're squatting down, and believe me, you're going to squat or kneel down, you want to be eye level with this thing, you're going to get electrocuted. You can't see those 4 discs at all. But Baruch did because he took it down to take it out of Jerusalem. So he's the only one who describes it. Now remember, he's a primitive man, so he's going to describe it the best way he can. So and the Lord said unto Moses, speak unto Aaron. Okay, I already said that. Only Baruch was writing a few descriptions. Okay, I covered that. Okay. In Ezekiel 1:4, the appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of beryl. Beryl is a multicolored stone. It grows in a six-sided prism in tubes. And it comes in blue, a reddish color, clear, green, a variety of things. So that's what the beryl looks like. And they four had one likeness. All four discs looked the same. And their appearance and their work was as if it were a wheel within a wheel. So imagine you've got a bunch of, we could say, LEDs around and multiple sides, probably like an RGB. I'll show you in a second example of it. Here's another reference he gives. And I looked, behold, four wheels beside the cherubim, one wheel beside one cherubim, and another wheel beside another cherubim, and the appearance of the wheels was a color of a beryl stone. As for their appearance, they four had one likeness. I won't go on further. Okay, now this is where he actually describes a hologram. When they went towards their four sides. They turned not as they went, but to the place whither the head looked, they followed it. They turned not as they went. He was describing a hologram. That's what he's describing as a hologram. Following happened inside the temple. This is when he's in the temple in Jerusalem. And the glory of the Lord mounted up from the cherub to the threshold of the house. Now, when he says that, mounted up from, probably saw beams of light going up through into the smoke and creating an image. And they're on both sides of the cherubim. It was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of the Lord's glory. And the sound of the cherubim were heard even to the outer court. In other words, it was so damn loud that he couldn't miss it. One of the mistakes that Solomon made when he built the temple, he made the roof too high. So he really ended up filling up with a lot of smoke in order for the damn thing to work. Here's some examples of colored holograms of how it's made, RGB. So if you had, now we say a beryl has RGB colors in it. So maybe that's what he's trying to say, is that we've got these three colors, red, green, blue, which is all the colors and plus more in beryl, and it's creating a color hologram in the smoke above the cherubim, above the ark. Here's another reason somebody made a color hologram of a pharaoh, and I found this article in Nature, Light Scattered Electrons to Make Holograms, and this is the reference for it. You know, electron beam, light, a modulated metal disc, and you wind up with a hologram. Since they're tens of millions of years more advanced than us, I have a feeling they improved on this. What do you think? Here's a rose, again, a hologram in color. So you can do it, and that's what I think they saw. So you had something, a primitive TV set, a holographic TV set. You had the sound from the spark gap, and you had a picture projected into the smoke above the ark. Now you understand why they had to sacrifice the animal. They wanted a fat fire, basically, inside a room with no chimney, no ventilation, and why the top of the curtain on the east side, the roof system went down 10 feet. They wanted the smoke there. They didn't want to escape. Okay. What were the two tablets? It winds up coming in. What were the two tablets after all of this? And Moses turned and went down from the mountain. I'm going to correct a couple of things you'll understand. From the mount, and the two tablets of the testimony, that's the two tablets in his hand. Tablets were written on both sides, both their sides, on the one side and on the other side they were written. And the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God. Now I covered this in Series 2 on the creation of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, for those alleged scholars who say, oh, the Torah was written over 700 years and finished off by Jeremiah, I've covered this before. You're painfully wrong. And Moses, I mentioned this in Moses' 10 code systems also. He left as a code system that there's no question he created the chapters and verses and how many symbols were in that Torah that he brought down, the 2 tablets. Number of letters in Torah is 304,805. You double it because everything's repeated twice. Total, 609,610. Number of Hebrew males that left Egypt, 603,550. This number is repeated also when they're at the hill also. Number of chapters and verses in the Torah, 6,034. Half the number, 12,068. Number of chapters and verses. Number of letters for the titles of the 5 books, 26. Gee, look at that. The same number. So in other words, Moses gave us a hash total. Of course, you had to be smart enough to figure it out. Now, this number is made up of 12,068, the number of years between the polar versals, times 50 gives you 603,400. And like I explained in the other video series 6, the 150 was one of the code systems. The unspoken name of God is Yod-He Vav-He Yehovah. Cumulative small numbering of Yod-He Vav-He gives you the 150. So what Moses was saying with this number, he left Egypt with the knowledge of the polar versals, the cataclysm, thanks to God, or because of God. You'll find it in there, or it's in Moses 10 code systems. Orthodox Jewish tradition about the Torah. Now I've listed, there's really 7. This is number 1, 4, and 5. The Torah was written before God created the earth or the universe. Quote, God already had the Torah with him in the form of all the letters before he created the world, but the letters were combined into words only after forming the Torah as we know it. So it tells you right off the bat, you had 304,805 symbols, a string of symbols, no word breaks. And from this, Moses took the 22 symbols, made 20 sound values, 2 had no sound values, and he created the surface story. But it's not what the Torah actually is, like I explained in series 2. The Torah is the cause of the world's creation and the power that maintains its existence. Another approach used to express this philosophy is that as long as God thinks the universe, it exists. To understand who God is, you must understand the Torah. Ladies and gentlemen, think in terms of an operating system. That's what they're describing here. Here's your reference down here. The people that put this technology in the cave, like I've said before, were tens of millions of years more advanced than us. They knew the program that creates our reality. That's how they were able to get that thing that looks like a throne on top of the ark to work. The Jews didn't create it. And that rod that Moses had. And obviously Moses had a running conversation with the operating system because he held that rod, whatever it looked like. Lesson of Jews on what they say about the 2 tablets. The 2 tablets on which the 10 Commandments were engraved, and just the words of it are by nature divine. These were created by God's own hand and were made of a sapphire-like stone. On each of the 2 tablets, the letters were legible on both sides, for like the tablets, the writing and the pencils for inscriptions too were of heavenly origin. It is another of the attributes of the tablets that although they were fashioned out of the hardest stone, they could still be rolled like a scroll. That's the legends. That probably originated from Moses. Let me explain. I mentioned it earlier. These are not 2 stone tablets. Moses at the time was 81 years old, and we don't know how deep they cave it, but let's say it's at least 5 or 10 miles deep. It's probably something like Carlsbad Caverns, which goes 25 miles. But let's say we know it took them a day in, a day out, so that's a lot of walking. Do you think an 81-year-old guy could hike, 4 or 5 miles, or 6 miles in, same distance out from the mountain to where the encampment was, where the Ephraimites were, carrying 2 of the tablets? It was 3/8 of an inch thick in marble. It would have been about 90 pounds, the 2 of them. It had to be thicker, because I knew that's something that thin would break. The stone would break. So if it was a 1/2 inch, you're looking at 110, 120 pounds. An 81-year-old guy is not carrying 100 and some odd pounds on his back over 10 miles. No way. So you know right off the bat, it just cannot be true. Anyway, we'll go on. Now you have an understanding what he had to put up with and what he had to do. Now, what I'm going to show you here is why the story is so jumbled up. Some of it's out of sequence. Some places he has no choice. He has to use a word he really didn't want to use because he had no choice. You can't change any of the letters, really symbols, or add anything. That was the problem. Even though over the years the scribes have screwed up, and I mentioned it in Series 2, which letters to watch out for that they may have, and I know cases where they did screw up. This is an example how out of sequence just parts of Exodus is. 19, they arrived at Mount Sinai. God offers them the kingdom of priests, a holy nation. There was a whole group are going to be a kingdom of priests. Well, who's going to be the congregation? The rest of the world. Moses in the cave, God comes down on the hill. The 10 Commandments, how to make the altar of the stone. Well, I guess he told them this is what's there, but this means he had to have had the Torah, or unless he was just told it. Chapters 21, 22, ordinances. 23, ingathering, end of the year. Well, that was the next year. What's in blue really happens at the end of the story, not the beginning of their period of time. Remember, they're there for 10 months and then 50 days. About the angel to lead them to a place where he is prepared for them. That's at the end when they're just about to leave. This is also the end of the 40 years of wandering here. The beginning of the arrival at Mount Sinai. Here, these two is about the end, and here is the beginning. Chapter 24, beginning arrival at Mount Sinai. But by verse 7 and 12, Moses took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. This is after he had it. Moses received the Torah. That's the 2 tablets he was given. That was the end of the period. Then the 40 days and 40 nights, that was after the thing was sanctified. It wasn't 40 days, it was 1 day in, 1 day out. Chapter 25, God tells Moses the materials to build everything. This is towards the beginning. This is all beginning stuff. Description of the tabernacle, the ark, blah, blah, putting the blood on and Aaron. This is before they set up the thing. It said on the first day of the first month of the 2nd lunar year, the whole thing was done and put up. So all of this stuff was sanctifying Aaron and at that time 4 sons. This is before 2 of them got electrocuted. So this is before that date. Description of the incense altar and stuff like that, that's before or during. Bezalel is shown, Bezalel is shown by God how to build everything that will be made. And then 18, the 2 tablets of the Torah are given to Moses. That's at the end. This is at the end. Moses comes down from the Mount Sinai holding the 2 tablets. That's at the end also. Again, this is after Aaron does his stupid thing and builds the golden calf. 3,000 Levites are killed. That's at the end. Congregation are told to leave to a place God told Moses. Again, this is the end of the period. So we got end and beginning. It gets worse. This is all end of the cycle. 35, Moses tells the congregation what they will build. That's at the beginning. Bezalel told how to make the tabernacle again. This is repeated almost word for word, some of it, to back there. Finally, first day of the first month, second year, everything's finished and ready. So you see, it's the reason why it's jumbled. Maybe this is why some scholars say, well, this thing was written over 700 years. It wasn't. You have to appreciate the problem Moses had. After Genesis was written, he's already then created the words, the grammar, and how to put the stuff together, what the language was. And he had the unenviable task, how do you make a surface story here that would be coherent? Well, in Exodus, there is a sequence that happens. In Leviticus and Numbers, it is all jumbled up, but you can get away with it there, and the same thing goes for Deuteronomy. But he couldn't do it with Exodus, and you can see it's a hodgepodge. It's not his fault. No writer would write like this, and he would neither. But he had no choice, because he's stuck with a string of symbols that he can't change. I give the guy a lot of credit for what he's able to do. Now we get to Aaron. What a boob. You're in the movie The Ten Commandments. You had Nathan is the one who's constantly against Moses, trying to take over. There wasn't any Nathan. You know who the Nathan was? Moses' own brother, Aaron. This is Aaron's altar, looking down at it. Probably what Moses would have seen. This is a close-up of it. Each one of these squares is 2 feet. This is the same diameter as the first altar that Moses created at the western, southwestern end of the hill. So he copied his brother's thing. And here's the wadi right here. Here's the platform where the golden calf was. You can see it's rectangular. It wasn't that big, and it was there. And this is the clay and stuff like that they used to fill in to make it a flat bed. So it's real. I found the pieces. Moses' reaction to what his brother did. The verse that this shows up is Exodus 32:19. The literal current translation from the Hebrew word breaks is. Now, this is the literal translation. He is when to approach the camp. He is seeing the calf and flutes. And he is being hot anger of Moses, and he is flinging from hands of him the tablets, and he is breaking them below the mountain. There's Aaron's altar, a satellite photo. There it is. The golden calf was right over there. This is a ridge on above here. Now, you got a big open area. This is where the Ephraimites were encamped. It goes further up. Why did he put his altar right there? Because this ridge here prevented you to see the top of the Mount Sinai and where the tabernacle was already up. He put it here, because that's how I know when he built this thing. This is after the first year, the first month of the second year after the tabernacle was put up, and Moses was up there already, there. This is the only place you could see that tabernacle. And it says it in the verse there. I didn't put it up here. I forgot to put it up. But it says that basically that's the same thing, the only place that you could see it. That's why he put it there. I mean, why not put it in the middle of the area where we could see it? No, puts it there. So Moses comes down from the hill. By the way, it says that the stream came from the hill. Well, here's the stream right here. No problem finding it. He's probably sitting in one of the fire pits I found up here. I showed you in the previous altar. Sorry, the previous video. I don't know if it was 2 or 3. I think it was 3. And he looks down, and he sees what his stupid brother did. But anyway, I didn't believe. Here's a guy who's really pretty smart. He's just got done talking to the operating system of the universe. Do you think he'd take 2 tablets that he got from the operating system inside the cave and break them for something that his stupid, jealous brother did? Of course not. He didn't. So I didn't believe the surface story. And since I already discovered they play games and with the letter breaks and the thing, so I went into went into it again. So I divided the letters differently. And this is how I broke it again. And what I found also was this covenant letter, Vav Yud, is not a word, but it's used in sometimes, and he is. So they use that. But my English translation from 32:19, breaking the letters differently, I get this, and it makes more sense. And he, when he approached towards the encampment, he saw near the calf and performing music. Remember, Joshua said he heard the sound of battle, and Moses corrected him and said, no, I sound of people of celebration and stuff like that, probably music. Music. He delayed grew, hot with anger, wrath of Moses dropped from hand the tablets, and he sat down to see from below the mount. That makes more sense, and that's really what it should be. He saw what his brother did. I showed you in the previous video. The fire pits, I had a string of fire pits up on the ledge there. It's only like 20 or 30 feet above where the Ephraimites were encamped. And he sees what his stupid brother did when he was away for 8, 9, or 10 days. And he got mad as all hell. And he couldn't break those things if he wanted to. It was probably a polycarbonate of an unknown type. It was so hard you could never break it. He just dropped it. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and they fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. If his brother didn't get executed, nobody did. Remember, I told you there were no Levites. They all died off in the period of slavery. What Moses was telling us, at least me, 3,000 times 24.136 is 72 for divided by 12 for the 12 tribes. Really, that's the atomic weight of carbon. Gives you, look, 6,034, the number of chapters and verses in the Torah. So, like the hash total, what does it tell you? Moses is the one who created the chapters and verses to make that number show up. For those scholars who you thought you knew something about the Torah, whether you're rabbis, ministers, or priests, you just found out you know nothing. You don't know anything about this book. Exodus 29:20. Thou shalt kill the ram and take of the blood and put it upon. Well, this is funny. This is what God wanted Moses to do to his brother when he's being sanctified before the tabernacle was put up. So put you in a frame of reference. This is really telling about Aaron. Thou shalt kill the ram and take the blood and put it upon the tip of the right ear of Aaron. Why is he doing that? Because Aaron didn't hear the cries and the pleadings of his brethren, the other surviving 10 tribes, nor did his father or grandfather or anybody in the Ephraimite line. And upon the tip of the right ear of the sons of his sons. The reason why, remember, his sons are late 50s and 60s. They were priests also of Hathor, and probably didn't listen to what was going on with the other tribes. They didn't, like I said, the Ephraimites were Egyptians. They saw themselves as Egyptians. They were in the country for over 170 years. They were Egyptians. They couldn't care less for these slaves. And upon the thumb of their right hand. Now, I think the reason why is I think they made a signature with putting an ink on their thumb and put it on a document. That was their signature. Upon the great toe of the right foot, because they probably never bothered to even go down to Goshen to see the slaves, their brethren. They didn't do one step to help them. And dash the blood against the altar round about, and thou shalt take of the blood that is upon the altar and of the anointed oil, and sprinkle it upon Aaron and upon his garments. They're sprinkling blood on his clothing, upon his son's clothing, upon the garments of his sons with him, the 2 younger ones. And he and his garments shall be hallowed, and his sons' garments with him. In other words, you have blood on your hands? This is literally, they sprinkle blood on everything on them. Imagine the picture you got in your head of what's going on here. That's what God is saying. You got blood on your hands for ignoring the pleas of your own brethren. God wasn't too happy with Aaron. And his two older sons went into the tabernacle during this sanctification period, and they got electrocuted, and that was the end of those two sons. Okay, now the end of it. This covers about 260, maybe 280 years, from Abraham destroying idols, his belief in an unseen God, Abraham selling his sister/wife twice to buy the cave, Jacob deceiving Esau to inherit the cave, Jacob having 4 wives and 12 boys and 1 girl. We don't want to forget the girl. Joseph being sold by his brothers, the Pharaoh's wife buying Joseph. Talk about luck. Joseph's greed, his intelligence and management skills. These are very important in order to be able to pull off to raise all that grain. Keep in mind, that is an act of God. Because of that drought, he saved probably millions of people because he was able to sell them food. Of course, he kept we don't know how much of the money he kept, but he did keep a lot. Moses killing the Egyptian, forcing him to leave because of the knowledge of the cave. Moses going deep into the cave and finding the technology in the rod because the guy was curious. Same thing goes for Abraham. He was curious. He went all the way down the cave and, gee, guess what I found? Moses leading the Exodus and finally building the ark and receiving the 2 tablets that became the Torah. I have gone through in my head a number of times that anything here would have changed. Would we have a different result? And unfortunately, no. Anything one of these things changed, if Joseph was honest with his girlfriend, the Pharaoh, say, can I have 5% for my work? She probably would have given it to him. He would have been able to spend the money. He probably would have supported his relatives if he wanted to back in the Sinai, or he wouldn't have, and they would have all died. If he wasn't sold by his brothers, they would all die during the famine. Goes on. I've gone through every single here. You wouldn't have gotten to this point, the 2 tablets and the Torah. I only come up with one answer why God did this over a spread of that many years, more or less. There's the answer. I can't come up with another solution. This is what the symbols originally looked like here, and this is what the alphabet we have of today of the Hebrew alphabet. This is the very first alphabet. Nobody can tell me different. 22 views of this waveform. Late Bronze Age people didn't come up with this pattern. No way in hell. Why? Imagine, I'll tell you why. Why did God do this? Or for my atheist friend, why did the operating system do this? Imagine trying to do a math journal or a physics journal in hieroglyphics or in cuneiform writing. It ain't going to happen. Just can't do it. Without that alphabet, this is the very first, we wouldn't have had the advancement in technology to eventually figure out that we're in a synchronous system, that there is a clock cycle of 12,068 years, and that during this clock cycle, all hell breaks loose. Sun novas, Earth stops the rotation, we have an ice age. It's very detrimental to all life forms on not just this planet, all over the universe. This is happening all over the universe at the exact same time. So what did the operating system do? He deliberately interjected and orchestrated what you just saw here. Everything from, now you understand why I did the series on volumes 1, 2, and now this 3. So you understood a longer perspective of what's really going on and why all of this happened. You deserve to know why this happened, why the Hebrews were chosen. They weren't the greatest of tribes, they were the smallest of tribes. Mount Sinai is the smallest of mountains. It's not even a hill. And why? Because I've said before, when you're the operating system of the universe, you are all powerful. Everything exists because of you, whether it be the rock, your body, everything you see exists because the operating system makes it on a continual basis. So he did this for the alphabet. If you can come up with a better answer, write to me.